Been a while, man, since I've done one of these. Wait for a few people to tap in. I know my notifications probably don't go out the same way they used to because it's been so long since I've done a live. But I'll wait for a few of you to get in and hit the like button to let me know if you can see me and hear me. Once you do tap in, if you can hear me, tap a 1 in the chat. Type a 1 in the chat, rather, if you can hear me. Peace, peace. What's good? What's up? Let me know if y'all can hear me. Okay, cool. I'm glad you guys can hear me. So, yep, just gonna chat for a few about some of the stuff that I've been seeing out here. I know it's been a while, man, since I've been around, and between having some trouble with computers and just getting healthy, man, it's been a little bit, but I'm coming back, man, soon. I'm definitely gonna get back to doing things more consistently soon. But anyway, man, I hope y'all doing well today. Before I get started with any other talk, one of the things I wanted to talk about, obviously, is the obvious. Darren Hamlin, definitely prayers for his family. And, this is, man, you hear people say this all the time and it's becoming cliche to hear, but, you just never seen anything like this before, and you don't want to see this, but this is absolutely the horrors of what can happen in football. And so, it's unfortunate, but definitely prayers up for his family and his well-being, his recovery. From what I understand, the last report I saw was that it's looking more positive now than it has since it happened. So just gonna continue to lift that brother up in prayer and his family. Hope y'all doing well today. But yeah, man, been a while. Got to show y'all this, man. My pops, my mom and my dad actually came through. Check that out. Invicta Carolina Panther watch, man. This watch is fire. I've owned some nice timepieces in my life, but I promise you that's the best watch I've ever owned in my life. So shout out to my parents for that. But let's get to the topic at hand, man. Harbaugh. So if y'all don't mind me, I'm driving, but I'm going to chat. We're going to chop it up. So I saw the reports like you guys saw the reports. Jim Harbaugh speaking with David Tepper. And I got to tell you, I'm ecstatic. I am absolutely ecstatic about it. And the reason is because it just shows what we have as a roster is something that's appealing. When you think about like all the teams that are available that need coaches, teams that Jim Harbaugh has more familiarity with, the Colts, I think there's a, familiarity base there. There's the Denver Broncos. They have a quarterback that would, seem to be more enticing than anything we have at this very moment. And I mean, honestly, there's probably other teams. I'm sure if you polled all 32 teams, I guarantee you would have people inside the organizations of those teams that would take Jim Harbaugh as a coach, even with their current situation. Now, there's a few we can eliminate. Obviously, we can eliminate KC. We can eliminate, Buffalo. You can eliminate, quite a few. But just for example, if the Raiders, if Jim Harbaugh shows interest in the Raiders, you really think they're going to hold on to Josh McDaniel? I don't think so, because I don't think that Josh McDaniel has proven himself to be a head coach. I think Josh McDaniel is possibly a worse head coach than our previous, head coach. But that's neither here nor there. The point is he's interested in Carolina. And by and large, I can see on Twitter, we are very much interested in him. And here's the reason, in my opinion, why I think this would be perfect. So I had tweeted yesterday in response to a tweet that I saw from the guys at PNP. Shout out to Rashad and Dave at PNP. I had tweeted a response when they talked about, I think it was Rashad may have tweeted this. He said, do your research on Jim Harbaugh before you make an opinion. This is not, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I kind of think this is what he was getting at, that this is not a Matt Rhule hire. This is completely different, and I could not agree more. And I talked about how Jim Harbaugh flipped a roster that went 6-10 over to a 13-3. I was wrong. I said 12-4, but it was actually 13-3. And they were indeed a Kyle Williams muff punt away from beating the Giants and going on to the Super Bowl. The Giants who went on to beat the Patriots for the second time. And that could have been them, the very first year. And then he comes back the next year and actually goes to the Super Bowl, beats Seattle, I believe, and goes to the Super Bowl that next year. As a matter of fact, Colin Kaepernick came through and steamrolled us, if you guys remember, in the early rounds of the playoffs when we started off 1-3 and then rolled off, 12 wins to go 12-4 that year. And then we ended up, obviously losing, and, the rest is history. But here's the point that I'm making. When you look at the parallels of that 2010 San Francisco team that he took over in 2011, they had a guy who was a first-round pick who really wasn't that successful, up until that point, in Alex Smith, who many thought was a bust, in the same draft with Aaron Rodgers, and many thought that he was a bust. But he ended up having his best season, statistically, at that point in his career, with Jim Harbaugh as his head coach. So he takes over that. Frank Gore was still there. It's not like they didn't have a roster, but I do think people get it misinterpreted. Like, they were 6-10. He unlocked Vernon Davis, right? Vernon Davis, and I tell you, one of the things that I love about Jim Harbaugh, because you could easily say, like, all right, well, what if Singletary would have had one more year? Like, what if they had given him just a little bit more time? Is it possible that he gets them to 10 wins? Of course, it's possible. More continuity, another off season, but sometimes hope that someone else can bring can change things. I'll give you an example. So, because I don't want to take any shots at Mike Singletary, but I kind of look at it sort of like the Golden State Warriors, right? So the Warriors have Mark Jackson as their head coach, and they were still rolling. Mark Jackson comes out and makes a bold statement. I got the best backcourt in the history of basketball. And at the time, people were like, what? With Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Let me tell you again. Let me say it again out loud so make sure the people in the back hear it. I have the best backcourt in the history of basketball, right? And, of course, people were laughing or whatever, but you can start to see, them come together. But there was still just something missing. Same roster, something missing. What was that missing ingredient? Draymond Green. David Lee gets hurt, goes down. They hire Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr tells them, look, y'all are a great shooting backcourt. Y'all are, good, pretty good offensive team. Sell out on defense. And when they brought in Draymond, the rest is history, dynasty. And you could look at the same thing in a parallel with Jim Harbaugh. He has the same roster. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look, that draft, the 2010 draft, their first round draft pick when Jim Harbaugh, takes over was Aldon Smith. There was no quarterback to be had in that draft. The number one quarterback was Sam Bradford. The next quarterback off the board was Tim Tebow. So if I'm him, I ain't taking no quarterback in that draft. I don't blame him. So he takes over that roster. He drafts a pass rusher, right? They already had, the year before they drafted Navarro Bowman to pair up with Patrick Willis, who's an animal, and so the defense is more bolstered, and then you got now bringing in Aldon Smith was an incredible interior pass or a pass rusher just in general. And so that changed everything, to me, the attitude that Jim brought in, the intricate details, the small things, Vernon Davis talks about how his career was changed. The trajectory of his career was changed when Mike Singletary had that, can't coach him, can't win with him, can't do it press conference, right? But really what took him to the next level was Harbaugh's leadership. That's what took him to the next level. So, like, I think about guys that we have on this roster, right? I don't know if Panther Pickle is in the chat, but I saw Panther Pickle talking, adamantly about how Brian Burns is a real 3-4 linebacker. How many times have we seen Brian Burns like dropping back into coverage and, playing pretty far off ball and stuff like that? And they try to, he's a hybrid player that they put in a 4-3 that Steve Wilks primarily runs. And he's not a 4-3 defensive end. He's a linebacker. But unfortunately, he's just kind of playing the hand that he's dealt. For him to be doing this well, kind of being a tweener, just shows you just the immense amount of talent that he has that might just need to be cultivated in the right way. So I look at a guy like him. I look at a Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin's in that tweener position. I personally think that Jeremy Chin should move to linebacker. I know many people think that he might be too small, but if you look at Fred Warner, who plays for the San Francisco 49ers currently, Fred Warner and Jeremy Chin have very similar measurables. So I don't think that he would be too small to play the position. As a matter of fact, I think he would be the perfect answer for a Mike linebacker, and it saves you from having to draft one. That's just my opinion. But we'll see what happens with that. But I just look at, the prospects. We have 10 picks in this upcoming draft, and there's a lot of, this draft is linebacker, pretty linebacker solid. There's a lot of good tight ends coming up in this draft. You got, obviously the number one thing people are going to be looking at is quarterbacks. And that's another reason why, if you're a fan of, the Carolina Panthers like I am and we are, man, Jim Harbaugh brings a really significant skill set as far as his ability to evaluate the quarterback position. And that is something that is going to be paramount moving forward for this team. And here's the reason. So, and I'm going to get to the Wilks thing in a minute, James. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and just discuss that now. All right, so I'll discuss that, the Steve Wilks thing. See, I like Wilks. I really do. And to be honest with you, Jim Harbaugh is the only person, in my opinion, that I would even consider hiring over a Steve Wilks. There's just some guys, man, like, I think about, like, let's say you were Dallas back in, the 90s when they hired Jimmy Johnson, right? What's my man's name? Jerry Jones had his pick of who he was gonna, pick up. Now they were coming off a legendary Tom Landry, but let's just say hypothetically Chuck Noll is tired of coaching in Pittsburgh. He comes calling. You think he's telling them no? Absolutely not. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not saying no to Chuck Noll. He's not saying no to, Don Coryell, who coached the Chargers or nothing like that. But those options weren't available. And he already had was going to be walking out the door anyway. So none of that stuff really mattered. Like, he wasn't going to go after, like, if one of those guys came about, he was going to pick up the phone and at least entertain it. Now, whether or not he actually, brought those guys in is to, remains to be seen, but he was at least entertaining it, similar to what Tepper's doing right now. So we don't know for a fact if Wilks is not going to get this job. But let me tell you what I do love about what Wilks has done. Wilks is the truth that provides clarity. I love it. Because Wilks came in and showed you exactly what this team needs to be successful, right? He showed you how good the team can be with the pieces that we have, but he provided enough clarity to show you the pieces that are necessary to take this team to the next level. What kind of pieces? Well, if Tommy Tremble develops to be a better tight end, then obviously you got something there. But I would say tight end. Tight end would be something I would target in this draft. I'm still not big on the fact that they re-signed Dante Jackson. I like Dante. I think Dante's a swell guy. But, like, the injury history and, I just don't know if I make that decision. I'm not, when you have a generational, Stephon Gilmore in the room, I don't think I'm letting that guy go, but Dante has been loyal. He's a hard worker. He's one of the, really souls of that defense, and you can see that in training camp this year when they done the camp confidentials. So it's not hard to see why they would choose a guy like that and pay him. But at the same time, it's like, man, it makes it really tough when you just kind of watch it from the outside and just think, man, like, this guy's been hurt, like, what, just about every season, and you just don't get consistency. Obviously, J.C. Horn, I don't think we see what happened Sunday if J.C. Horn was playing. But, he wasn't. And it's another season of where you just like, but the difference with this one, though, is like J.C. Horn, that was a freak accident. That was a situation where his wrist got broke. It wasn't anything that he could do about that. It's football. So that's going to happen. But you just hope that he stays healthy. But DB might be something that I certainly look at, in the draft. Obviously, linebacker, as we talked about, who knows what Brandon Smith develops into. You would hope that he would be a replacement for Shaq at like the Sam linebacker. But I'm not running with Shaq as my Mike. Like, I would really seriously consider talking to Jeremy Chin about Mike linebacker. But, like I said, the point is that Wilks, despite all of those things that I just mentioned, was able to get us to a point where we were within, like Mike Evans, torched us or whatever, but we were close to being able to compete to win the NFC South and go to the playoffs. And who knows what happens if you make it in the dance, man. The year that the Giants beat the Patriots, man, they were 9-7, and they steamrolled through Dallas, Tampa, and I think maybe Green Bay to go on to the Super Bowl and beat Tom Brady's undefeated Patriots that year, right? And so anything is possible when you get to that point. But I don't hold that against Wilks because, like I said, Wilks did not draft any of these players. He exceeded any expectation that was set for him, and I'm glad he got an opportunity, which means to me, I think Steve Wilks will get an opportunity to coach in this league. It still may be with us because it's not a guarantee with Harbaugh. But what I love, like I said, and I think that Wilks, you can honestly credit Wilks for being a reason that Jim Harbaugh is looking at Carolina. Because like I said, he provided clarity. Matt Rhule had no identity with this team. And by the way, let me just say this, man. I thought about this. I hadn't really spoke on this because I haven't been online in a while. I didn't really get a chance to speak on the Matt Rhule situation when he went on his press conference tour. So I'm just going to talk about it for like just a second. Matt Rhule has to be the person, like he has to be like the most self-awareness of anybody in history, right? Because you go on a press conference talking about, you didn't draft any players and all this kind of all these different facts that we can pull, and receipts were pulled like crazy from everybody, from anybody on, Twitter or Instagram, whatever, and YouTube. But the point is like, man, you could have done yourself a huge service by letting this play out, because you did indeed draft a lot of these guys. A lot of the guys that we have right now that were successful this year, outside of like Brian Burns, Derek Brown, I remember the conversations that there was a fight between Matt Rhule and Marty Hurney, because I think, and I may have this wrong, it may be backwards, but from my understanding, there was an argument between Matt Hurney and Matt Rhule Marty Hurney, excuse me, and Matt Rhule about drafting Derek Brown, because one of them wanted to trade back. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Marty Hurney who wanted to trade back and Matt Rhule that wanted Derek Brown. Now, could be wrong, but regardless, if you don't come out saying all this crazy stuff, man, you got an opportunity to look like, hey, I didn't figure it out. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't do it, but at least I could eye the talent for somebody who can. But instead, you come out and shoot yourself in the foot by telling us all the stuff that you didn't do or didn't, just trying to, escape blame, which was pretty much his biggest problem when he was here. But that's neither here nor there. Wilks comes in, he provides the clarity, showing you that we have real talent that you can build around on this roster. Now, do I think that Harbaugh being hired would change this team immediately from 6-11, which it looks like we might end up being, or 7-10, to a 13-win team? I don't think so yet. And the reason I'll have to wait until, to see the draft and just see how that plays out and everything, and free agency and all that kind of stuff. But the only reason I say that it would be different is because you did have some core pieces on that San Francisco team. I mean, Frank Gore, went down, if I'm not mistaken, as 2 or 3 in rush yards in history, right? Or he's up there. He's somewhere up there, right? What's up, Secret? Long time, yes. Vernon Davis, that's a elite level tight end. Patrick Willis, who, at the time that he was at his peak, him and Luke were like 1 and 1A. Like, and you could coin flip, and I know a lot of people would be like, man, Luke was better. I would agree with that. But don't kid yourself. Patrick Willis was the real deal. And then you teamed him up. They had a very similar tandem that we had. Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman were very similar to our Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis tandem, right? So, he had that. He had, Carlos Dunlap. No, Carlos Dunlap was drafted later. I can't remember who else was on that team. I know they drafted Taylor Mays at safety, but they had someone else at safety that was really good. He drafted Eric Reed as well when he was there. But regardless, they did have a roster that was ready to compete, right? They just needed like a good coach. And I think that Carolina is on the brink of that. But I also think at the same time, defensively, you might have to break things down a little bit, unless Scott Fitterer, if he is the guy still, and Jim sit down and they identify guys in this draft and guys in free agency that they could come in and retool this defense. The problem is that because Phil Snow and Matt Rhule were so dead set on running, not a dedicated 3-3-5, but they committed to it, almost overcommitted. So that's why they go out and make the move of getting a CJ Henderson, giving up a 3rd-round pick when we had Dan Arnold and we were kind of, in flux at tight end. They go out and make a move like that because it fits the scheme. They drafted J.C. Horn. They drafted Keith Taylor. They drafted Troy Pride Jr. They go Stanley Thomas Oliver, go super heavy on corners, and none of my guy, why Big Joe, what's up? But they go super heavy on corners to fit this 3-3-5 mentality that they want to run. Not a primary defensive set, because the 3-3-5 is not a base defense, but because their base was always 4-3. But they could rotate to that set consistently, and that's why you go out and draft that many corners, who most of which have flamed out. Which I'm gonna tell you, I'm partial to Troy Pride because he's from where I'm from, and I don't feel like he got a fair shake. And it doesn't even look like he might even play again because I haven't seen anything from him. And I think his injury might have just been, something that was a career. And I hope not. I hope I hope to see him, be able to come back, because 1 year is not enough to evaluate. But what I will say is this. I think that Jim would have to partner with Scott or whomever to see what can we add to this right now, because I don't think you have to completely tear it down. But I do think that there is going to be, a bit of a curve. Now, he's the kind of guy that can come in and completely change everything. So who knows how that looks. But I just like that idea. And I like to think the same thing for Wilks. I like to think that what Wilks is doing can work, especially if he's able to draft defensive guys that he wants. If he's able to collaborate with Scott Fitter to draft the guys that he wants, I think you can see a complete change. I think if you have an offseason, OTAs, all that stuff is important, but none more important than the quarterback. And that's where I think that Jim Harbaugh has the edge, because I want y'all to consider something, right? Jim Harbaugh flipped a team from 6-10. We all know if you don't have a quarterback in this league, you cannot win. In this NFL, if you don't have consistency at quarterback, Brock Purdy is consistent. Go look at his numbers compared to Jimmy Garoppolo's numbers, and they're very, very similar. So he's better than they evaluated him to be, right? Sam Darnold looks better this year, but there's still some things that he struggled with historically that are still happening. You know what I'm saying? Give you an example. Sam Darnold struggled with fumbles, historically. Sam Darnold gets sacked down near the 10-yard line, or the 15 or whatever in that Tampa game. And that, to me, that completely changed the game. Even with us getting torched by, Mike Evans, I think if he holds onto that ball and we can drive and punt it deeper, or if we can, we still have a chance to compete in that game. So I think that there's a good chance that Harbaugh he couldn't necessarily improve those things with Sam, but what he can do is manage them better. And that's what you want more than anything else. You want this to be managed better. So now, am I saying that Sam would be my answer at quarterback? No. But here's why I would tell you that Jim, to me, would be the guy. Because Jim done what he done with Alex Smith. Alex Smith's stats, if you go look them up for yourself, Alex Smith's stats were far worse than Sam Darnold's stats at that point in his career. And he revitalized his career. I will never forget the press conference, Alex Smith coming in after they had rolled off like 6 straight. And he had this tag on his shirt that says, "I am Alex." Because people, he was basically joking, people forgot who I was. You forgot I was the number 1 overall pick in the 2003 or 4 draft, right? Number 1 overall. But who do people remember from that draft? Aaron Rodgers, rightfully so. And so it was just interesting to see how he was able to, turn that guy's career. And it wasn't like he was putting up small numbers. He was pushing the ball down the field. They did have a lot of dink and nut plays, and they could run the ball really well. They drafted Mike Iupati, who ended up, going on to be a Pro Bowler. I think he was the tackle or, guard, one or the other. But Mike Iupati was solid for a number of years for that team. And I think he went on to play for Seattle for a while as well. But the point is he was able to do that with Alex Smith. That next draft, who did they get? Colin Kaepernick, right? So he goes on to draft Colin Kaepernick the same year that Cam Newton was drafted, right? And we see what happened with that. So Harbaugh's a guy, and this is what it makes me think, right? So when you look at Harbaugh's track record with quarterbacks, Colin Kaepernick looked like he was about to take over the league. He got Andrew Luck drafted number 1 overall. Make no mistake about it. I love Cam Newton. Cam Newton is the reason, in my opinion, that the Carolina Panthers have 3 million subscribers on YouTube. On Instagram, Twitter. My apologies. He's part of the reason because of the electricity that he brought. But don't kid yourself to think that if Andrew Luck was available in that draft, he was who we were picking. I guarantee it. But regardless, he had Andrew Luck, made him a guy. When I'm looking at the prospects for what Jim Harbaugh can do in this coming draft, right, if they choose to go quarterback in this draft, because here's another thing I'll say too. I wouldn't necessarily count out if Wilks provided the clarity. Hey, look, why big? I'm going there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. If Wilks provided the clarity for this roster, of what this roster can be, right? Can you imagine what kind of clarity he could provide for Matt Corral? Here's why I say that. Often we look at completion percentage as the end all be all. I could have a 70% completion percentage. You or I could, right? If every call was underneath. If you could throw a football just a little bit, you know what I'm saying? If you could throw a football just a little bit and they call every single pass underneath and you're not afraid to get hit and you can process just a little bit of information, you could dink and dunk and get the ball where you want it to go. You know what I'm saying? What does that equal? Completion percentage. What is the most important stat for the quarterback, though? It is not that. Yards per attempt. That's where you win, right? Thank you, DB. Matt Corral had 10.7 yards per attempt his 2020 season and 8 the season before we drafted him, right? In my opinion, I think that you could really see if Wilks was able to provide clarity for the rest of the team, what kind of clarity could be provided for Matt Corral if given the opportunity? That's where I would say, okay, I'm willing to see what I have in this guy. He's going to be on the roster, right? But the thing that's enticing to me, somebody said it. I've seen a couple of people saying it in the chat. Jim Harbaugh and Anthony Richardson could be, I'm talking about ridiculous. I'm talking about unstoppable. Like when Anthony Richardson uncorks a ball 40, 50 yards down the field accurately, like just the thought of it would be insane. And it looks like it's shaping up. Like if they lose the Saints game, this is going to literally fall right in our laps. Because I can promise you this, no, like teams always get it wrong, man. Like, and we're the same, Vernon Butler, we're the same, so we're no exception. But a lot of teams always get it wrong. Like you can clearly see the writing on the wall. Like, hey, this guy has immense talent. You'll hear people talking about it, and they'll still go with what seems like the more surefire bet. Bryce is going to be at the top of this draft, as he should be, and I wouldn't even argue that. CJ Stroud's going to be at the top of this draft, as he should be. I wouldn't argue that. But after those two guys, like Will Levis, I like Levis. I think, Levis has some talent, no doubt. And I think that it's possible that Levis could be one of those victims of so much talent and not enough talent around you, and he also could be a guy that could be coached up. So I'm not going to take away from Will Levis's talent. But man, Anthony Richardson, man, just the thought of Anthony Richardson with this rushing attack now he's going to need time to develop. Maybe. That's another thing we don't know. You don't know how these guys are going to transition to the next level. There is no way to tell. You have no measuring stick to tell. Think about Jalen Hurts. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody. And it looks sustainable. If he stays healthy, it looks extremely sustainable. So you can't really, it is very, very hard to tell, how these guys transition. Better offensive line, more time to prepare. You got to remember, these guys are in college. When you get in the NFL, it's all ball. It's a career. I got all the data. I ain't got to worry about doing classwork. I don't have to worry about, limitations on being able to, study film. I got all the best nutrition in the world. I got all these, mentors. Man, that's another thing you got to think about. Look, just because NIL has become a big thing, it's not, NIL might be a big deal, but the thing is like, there's still limitations to what guys can do. You know what I'm saying? Like, because of potential tampering, I can't have certain pro guys hanging out with you at certain times. And if any of you guys out there are business savvy, any of you are entrepreneurs, any of you, even if you work a job that you've progressed in, that you've been promoted in, man, I'm telling you, You know all too well the importance of mentors. If you have mentors in your life, they do a couple of things for you. They teach you how to do what you do better than you can do it, and they teach you how not to do what other people do worse so you don't fall into it. So having a mentor is vital. So having that, at your capacity, you got. I find it hard to believe that someone like Anthony Richardson wouldn't have, guys like Delhomme, guys like, and I'm just talking about from the Panthers level. We ain't talking about league wide. I'm talking, guys like Delhomme, guys like even Cam or anybody, that would help mentor you to take you to the next level. You know what I'm saying? So I'm telling you, it's an enticing, probability. But here's the one thing I will say, even if it's not Anthony Richardson, there's another reason why I think Harbaugh is a great option is because even if Anthony Richardson is not his guy, what I will trust is who he chooses to be his guy. Trust me when I tell you, Colin Kaepernick coming out of Nevada, you know what I'm saying? Like, look, I know he drafted him in the second round. I know Colin had some, pretty solid, stats or whatever like that. But like out of Nevada, like nobody saw that coming. But when you have foresight, I mean, Jim was beating the table for this guy. Many people don't realize the reason that Jim Harbaugh did not work out in San Francisco, it's pretty wide known. Harbaugh can be a handful. He's a handful to deal with. He and Trent Baalke and Jed York could not get along. And that was the reason that, he ultimately was his demise, right? Well, I can tell you this. When you look at what happened here in Carolina, I'm not saying that he's going to come in here and be Bill Belichick. But I do strongly believe that he's going to have a lot of roster control if he wants it. And I think that's going to be the selling point. I really believe that. I believe that the selling point could be, hey, I'll come to you. Like, the money is the money. I've said this before. Why, Big Jordan, you know this. You've heard me say this a million times. When you get to a certain level of money, and you're talking to a guy, I ain't got money like that. You know what I'm saying? But I know this. I know that when you get to it, and this is from just having people, having mentors, having people in my life who are wealthy, right? When you get to a certain level of money, I'll never forget that somebody that was, that's really well off told me this. Man, you look more for peace than anything else. Because it ain't but so much that money can buy. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, you get to a certain level financially. I mean, yeah, if you want to be on some Michael Jackson stuff, buying Neverland, or on some what's my man name, the boss out of Houston, my man that owned Rap a Lot, the rap dude, I can't remember his name, but he bought I heard he bought an island or something like that. Somebody help me out with his name. Gosh, see, now it's gonna bother me that I don't know this guy's name. Mob Ties Daddy, what's his name? Y'all know him, but anyway, they say he bought an island. You know what I'm saying? Like. So yeah, Jay Prince, thank you. I had a mental block. But like Jay Prince bought an island, you know what I'm saying? But like, so if you want to do some stuff like that, then yeah, you're gonna have to get your bread up. But like the amount of people that you have to have under you to be able to finally make that kind of money, some people just want peace. So like if Jim Harbaugh gets paid $15 million from us, but the Walmart people out in Denver offering him $25 million, but he's in a way bigger media market. He's got Russell Wilson, so they're gonna be looking for him to win sooner. And not to mention you in the division with the guy who's probably going to be the successor to the GOAT in Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert, who's not too bad in his own right. Oh, not to mention the Raiders are going to have a pretty solid draft pick, so they might bring in one of these quarterbacks, and he becomes good. You want to compete with that? With little old Russell Wilson? I love Russell Wilson, but we can all look at the writing on the wall. Like, he's definitely in the later stage in his career, to say it honestly and kindly, as it should be. Russell's a good dude. But I ain't going to that division, especially not when I look at the NFC South. I'm competing against Desmond Ridder, Tom Brady gone. So Kyle Trask or whoever they decide to draft. And who's the Saints quarterback? I don't even know if they have a prospect at this point. And they don't have a pick because I think they gave it up to the Eagles, right? So like, or something like that. I may be wrong there. But the point is that this division looks enticing. Carolina put up a fight towards the end, against, and so is Bryce smaller than Russell Wilson? Not shorter, but physical stature, yeah. Oh yeah, much smaller. I'm sorry, I just happened to see that. But Bryce gonna be fine, man. The way, I gotta be honest, if we ended up at the top of the draft, I wouldn't even be talking about AR. Bryce would be my guy. Bryce processes on a level that's rare. Like, he sees the field in a very, very rare way. Bryce is gonna be fine. So I don't think I would. Yeah, Bryce, he's the lock at number one. And to be honest with you, and this is one of those kind of things like, man, look, I know I said what I said about Andrew Luck being the number one pick that year, right? Because of the comparisons to Elway, and all that kind of stuff. But, and I'm not this guy. If any of y'all know me that watch my show long enough, I ain't the race card guy at all. But I just got to think, if Will Levis was doing what Bryce Young is doing, I mean, you wouldn't even, it would be a 3-mile difference in the talk between Levis and the other quarterbacks. You'd be like, if you don't draft Will Levis, you're the dumbest franchise in history. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's that talented. The level of talent is that good. Not to mention, when we drafted Cam, I mean, what Cam did in one season at Auburn was phenomenal. And you could make an argument, and look, I love my team. I love my team. Don't leave it to me to tell you. Go listen to that interview with Devontae Adams when he said that he thought Carolina was going to take him, right? And tell me if you think that we done the best by Cam in his career. Because in my opinion, if Cam gets drafted by Denver, if Cam gets drafted by Arizona, if Cam gets drafted by Dallas, I mean, Cam probably 2 or 3 bowls up by now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that talent was just, I mean, it was another level. We look at, I mean, Cam had some seasons, the first season with the yards, more than Marino and everybody else with the yards, but then 15, 14 or 12, 13, whatever. But I mean, 17, Cam was on, I mean, that stat that they show about touchdowns and rush yards in a single game, like, look, don't get me in nostalgia. We talking about Jim Harbaugh, but I just had to go back for a minute. Cam was otherworldly, and I don't think that they built around him. You cannot premiere your offense with a tight end and a quarterback who runs. Sorry. And Cam was far more accurate and far more of a pocket passer than he was given credit for. But anyway, so yeah, Harbaugh. So y'all tell me some of y'all thoughts. I want to tap in with you guys. I'm gonna take a look at the chat here. So yeah, they traded first with Philly. Facts. Bryce is who we think Kyler Murray. Yeah, I agree with that. With Kyler Murray, man, like, I don't think Kyler Murray's issue is talent. I think Kyler Murray's issue is character. Who you are as a person. I'm gonna go off into a little tangent here for a second, because everybody was talking about, today, the Shannon Sharp, thing with Skip Bayless, and how Shannon Sharp, kind of had a dialogue with him back and forth about what he said. Excuse me, what he said. And I got to be honest with you, because I said some things on Twitter myself that, were a little out of character for me, because I was so frustrated with, Skip having a platform and saying what he said in the time that he said it. My biggest issue was this, is like, I don't think what Skip said was necessarily wrong in the way that he was, because when you go look back at his other tweets, he clearly cared about what was happening to that kid at the time. But I think when you lead up to the point where he said, like, how, that was the compromise question, was like, how does the NFL, stop this game at this time? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would they make such a decision? Which he was basically implying, like, if you look at the previous tweets, like, man, this shouldn't be happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, this, it should be, hey, we need to just, ice it up and move on. But this is not one of those kind of situations. The problem that I had with it was that sometimes you just got to read the room, and you being wrong isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. You can apologize and move on. Many of y'all know that I'm a believer. 1 Corinthians 9 tells us that we should be all things to all people. Paul was, right? So, like, it doesn't mean that Paul was compromising his faith, but what he was doing was being something different around everybody to be able to draw all people to Christ, as you should. You know what I'm saying? So, like, in a situation like that, man, hey, you know what? I made a mistake. I said something that shouldn't have been said at the time. I wanted to come out and apologize. If he do that, everybody call the dogs off. But when you want to be right, instead of getting it right, you double down on what you feel like your righteous indignation should be. That's the demise of a lot of people, unfortunately. But anyway, back to Carolina Panther football. I'm excited about this prospect of Jim Harbaugh. I would love to see who he would, and I mean, this is so early in the process. I'd love to see who he would have in mind, for his coaching hires. I've already seen like the Vic Fangio, things out there, which I wouldn't be opposed to that. I'd like to see who he would bring on with his staff. It's been a long time since Harbaugh's been in the league, but not much changes, man. And that's one thing I will say about, like quarterbacking. Like, man, it's the NFL. Like, at the end of the day, the pocket wins the Super Bowls, man. Like, the running stuff is cool, but the pocket still wins the Super Bowls. We saw that last year with Stafford. Mahomes won when Mahomes won the Super Bowl the year before, he threw 50 touchdowns. So you still have to win it from the pocket. So I think, what he could do with, any one of these quarterbacks, I'd be more interested to see the competition between whoever they draft or whoever they bring in and Matt Corral. Because I do have a soft spot for Matt Corral. I'm not even going to lie about that, because he did kind of just end up in the worst of situations, man. Like, you come in, you get injured. I think I heard Phil Perkins from Panthers Post talking about this. Shout out to Phil. But, like, he was like, man, like, and he said this early. He was on this, like, way back. He was like, man, if you bring in another quarterback, what are you going to do with Corral? And the question, honestly, the best that you could do for Corral is exactly what they did for Baker Mayfield. Because if they draft Anthony Richardson, Corral is not going to get a shot to be the quarterback. We've seen similar situations. Russell Wilson, who's struggling right now, once upon a time, took a job from a guy that was signed to a pretty big contract coming off of a, solid years of backup in Green Bay. But the problem is that he was signed. He wasn't drafted. If you spend draft capital on a quarterback, especially in the first round, that guy's playing. Unless he's Josh Rosen. And I don't think this is that situation, especially because that was a one-time situation with Wilks. Josh Rosen, you could kind of see the writing on the wall early, and they had a chance at Murray and they weren't passing that up. That's a completely different situation. But by and large, most of the time, that guy's playing. Now, Matt Corral would have to be, he would just have to be absolutely lighting it up in training camp. OTAs, training camp, you would have to see receivers coming out saying, like, man, when this guy throw the ball, like, it's like he put it on a rope and hand it to you, like, no matter what route you run. If he's that, yeah, then that first round pick might be in compromise. But I can assure you this, what I do think about Harbaugh versus what I think about Wilks in this situation, I love Wilks' tough demeanor. I love that, that no-nonsense approach. However, I do think that Wilks would still have to acquiesce to the overruling vote of a Tepper, right? Where I can assure you Jim Harbaugh would not. Why would he not? Because he's got suitors. If Jim Harbaugh came in one season, let's just say, right? I know there's a lot of hypotheticals here. But let's just say hypothetically Jim Harbaugh comes in and in one season notices, like, hey, we just drafted, throw a name out there, Will Levis. He does. I agree with that, Blunt. He does have a no-nonsense approach. But I'm going somewhere here. Let's just say they draft a Will Levis. And David Tepper is licking his chops. And he's, oh, man, he's so happy I got Will Levis. That's who I wanted all along. Or I got Stroud. Okay, big bag, let's say Stroud. Man, I got Stroud. I got, whoever. You put the name on the wall. It don't matter, name in the chat. You name who you want, right? But they get in training camp. Just like Chris Sims said. I remember this last year. Chris Sims said, man, if you draft Kenny Pickett, and you get in training camp and you see Sam Darnold flinging that rock and realize, like, wait, he's better. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold's better than Kenny Pickett, not at all. But what I am saying is that the talent level is like, it's a difference. And when you get in training camp, you see Matt Corral dicing, delivering, shredding them, in camp. DBs can't do nothing. Make it look like we got to go reevaluate our whole defense because he's going crazy. And then in preseason, he do the same thing. I don't think Wilks has the power to walk up in that office and say, hey, boss, I'm starting Corral. Harbaugh does. And let me tell you why I say that. It's not because of any shot against Wilks. It's because I earned the job through my coaching. You paid me, if I'm Harbaugh, to come here. I might have talked to you, but you and I both know if you fire me tomorrow, it's at least 3 or 4 people that would fire their coach to bring me in, college or NFL. He can walk up in that office and say, hey, I know we drafted Levis. I'm starting Corral. That's the difference. And to me, I'm like, man, that's what makes this so interesting. That makes this very interesting. The level of decision-making ability is what makes this interesting. If Jim Harbaugh likes Will Levis, Levis is going to be a quarterback if Jim Harbaugh is the coach and they get a chance to draft him. We may hate it, but I'm going to tell you, if Jim Harbaugh comes in and says he likes a guy, when you look at even most recently, we look back at Kaepernick. Look at the Chase McNamara situation in at Michigan. You know what I'm saying? And the difference that he made there. Jim Harbaugh's not getting top level quarterbacks to come play for him at Michigan. You could make an argument that that's part of the reason why he can't never make it to the dance. He can get all the way there, but only so close. Finally overcame Ohio State, which was huge for him, but still kind of like, on some Andy Reid stuff. But I really believe that if Harbaugh gets this opportunity with Carolina, considering where we're drafting, I mean, wouldn't it be just like Harbaugh, with the 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers select Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, and everybody be like, what? Hey, I'm going to tell you, in the moment, I'd be like, man, Jim Harbaugh a fool. But deep down inside, I'd be like, look, I'm excited because Harbaugh know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. I ain't questioning it. So anyway, I want to see some of y'all thoughts, man. DB said, I still want Michael Penix. We should wait on the QB. Hey, listen, I'll tell you something, man. Notice, I talked about him. I told Cody from the C3 Panther podcast, shout out to C3. I told Cody, I was like, man, listen, one of the best quarterbacks in this draft, maybe the best quarterback in this draft, is Michael Penix Jr. He's just not getting talked about. And he went back to college. So, Drake May, Caleb is the talk right now. Watch out next year, especially if he stays healthy, because he proved this season Michael Penix's biggest issue is he couldn't stay healthy. Indiana finally put together a whole season at Washington State. If he stays healthy, the continuation of next season, Mike Penix Jr. name will be right up there with Caleb and Drake May. So I highly suspect that. Quinn Ewers' name will probably be up there. I wouldn't say as a overall top prospect. I wouldn't, DJ Uiagalelei struggles, but with his athletic ability and size, I wouldn't say that he's a guy that somebody will take a flyer on him. So let's see. Could you see Burns get traded right before draft night? No. I think if Burns was going to be traded, he would have got traded when LA offered 2 first-round picks. And if in hindsight, if you ask me looking back, would I have made that trade? In all due respect to Brian Burns, yes, I would have made that trade. And the only reason I would have made that trade is because of what it could have set you up for. Brian Burns has been asked to do above and beyond what he's probably even capable of. The fact that he's able to do what he does. Notice last year, you don't have to look any further than last year. When Hassan Reddick played for Carolina last year, as soon as the ball was snapped, it was basically, hey, quarterback's the red cape, and I'm the bull. Go get him. Go get him. Ball snap. Go get him. I'm not asking you to drop back in coverage. I'm not asking you to cover tight ends or nothing crazy like that in zone. As soon as that ball is snapped, go get him. And if Brian Burns had the ability to do that, play in, play out, he probably would have 20 sacks a season. Who knows? But he's asked to do more. And if you'd have saw him go to LA, obviously with the Stafford injury and everything like that, it would have been poor. But he probably would have looked more like his comp, in my opinion, and that's Von Miller. I think he would have had a lot more opportunities, in a place like that. But no, I don't think that at this point, I don't think they draft him. Let's see my chat here. Okay, here we go. Let's see. If we trade two first, it better be a crazy offer. I agree with that. Matt Rhule had all the power too. I'd rather go the NFL route because who says Harbaugh will still be the same coach he was for the Niners? Rather go an NFL route because who says it'd be? Well, I mean, look what he done in Michigan. You know, I mean, Harbaugh had a Stanford team like David Shaw is a great coach. Harbaugh made Stanford relevant. You know, thank you, Big Bag. Yeah, Harbaugh made Stanford relevant. He made San Francisco 49ers relevant again. They were 7-25 in like a couple of seasons before he got there. Michigan, you know, he made Michigan relevant. And just because you don't win the national championship, I'm still not going to doubt you for what you were able to do. Like, man, people, this one thing you got to realize about Michigan, bro. It's cold. Man, these players want to go. Why do you think the Southeastern Conference is so bolstered? One, most people are closer to home because most big cities in America, major cities, are on the East Coast. And the South is warm. It's pretty. Beaches, you know, all this kind of stuff like, you know, or just tradition. You know, like, who would want to go play in cold Michigan? You know what I'm saying? Like, so the fact that he's able to recruit how he recruits and do what he done there, you know, and we're talking about a Michigan team that was, you know, if any of y'all, like, I'm a Clemson fan. South Carolina is our biggest rival. Shout out to USC for winning, you know, beating us this year finally. You know, I'll give you your props. But, like, man, they've been in the mirror for years since the Clemson hired Dabo, you know? And do I think that they'll win a title anytime soon? I don't think so. But the fact that they're competitive now, that means something. Shane Beamer's a real coach, you know? The portal might be a really good opportunity for them to get better, you know? And so I think the same thing with Michigan. Michigan's been in Ohio State's shadow for a decade. You know what I'm saying? And Harbaugh goes there in short of 2 years, they're competitive. And they play Michigan hard. And then this year and last year, they beat the crap out of them. That's no small feat. Especially because think about it. We looking at if we're going to acknowledge that quarterback is the most important position on the field, tell me the last Michigan quarterback that was a first-round pick. You know what I'm saying? Tell me the last Michigan quarterback that's even a starter in the NFL. You know, and Ryan Day, between Ryan Day and Urban Meyer, they had 3 guys that will potentially have gone in the first round. That being the late Dwayne Haskins, C.J. Stroud, and Justin Fields. Jim never had that. So that's the reason. And I'm telling you, furthermore, this is another point for Jim Harbaugh. This is another feather in his cap. Outside of Andrew Luck, who he got drafted number 1 overall, mind you, who has Jim Harbaugh had as a top tier level quarterback? He hasn't. So if he's able to do what he's doing with, I would never call anybody that plays in the NFL a bum. Because if any of y'all ever play football and train like those guys train, ain't no bums playing in the NFL. You know, you can argue with your mama on that one. But what I will say is that Jim Harbaugh didn't have a Cam. Colin Kaepernick wasn't a Cam. Alex Smith ain't a Tom Brady. You know what I'm saying? Alex Smith ain't even a Garoppolo. Who did he have? You know, McNamara ain't no C.J. Stroud. You know, like I said, the only quarterback he ever had, like super real deal quarterback, was Andrew Luck. So imagine if Jim Harbaugh actually gets a quarterback. Now you're looking at an Andy Reid situation. Andy Reid look like he might go on in the next 10 years and win 4 or 5 Super Bowls after going his entire coaching career just being good enough, getting there every single year, 5 straight, you know, trips to the NFC Championship, no small feat. You know, 1 to the Super Bowl with Philly, just couldn't get over the hump. Why? Because he didn't have his guy. You know, some guy, and then sometimes, I mean, yeah, you can make the argument. Well, look at what Nick Foles did. Man, that was lightning in a bottle. How often? That don't happen all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a good story. Did it happen again? Where's Nick Foles now? No disrespect to his injury, hopping around team to team. They had a loaded team, similar to how they do this year. And I ain't taking nothing away from Nick Foles. But what I will say is that if Harbaugh's able to do what he's doing without a guy, what can he do with one? Be pretty interesting. So what should we do with this pick? We can do a lot of movement wise, and our players have a lot of interest. We can honestly do whatever we want to. I agree with that. I think that like I said, the one thing that I feel like would provide clarity is the fact that, we saw some solid play from Sam Darnold. So I think you can build on that and bridge for your next guy. With that top pick, man, it just depends. It depends. The year that Jim Harbaugh took over, their top pick was Aldon Smith. So maybe he goes edge. Maybe he goes with there's a guy, I can't remember his name, guy out of Florida State, a good defensive tackle defensive end out of Florida State. There's the guy from Texas Tech. I ain't no draft guy, so I ain't no expert. You'd have to go, to the draft guys for that. But there's guys out there. There's certainly guys out there that are, D-line, like Sideshow, D-line, edge, or defensive tackle. Miles Murphy from Clemson. Jalen Carter, who I think will probably be gone within the top 3 picks, top 4 possibly. Jared Verse, yeah, that's his name. Yeah, I saw him, looked him up a little bit. He's legit. It looks the part anyway. Reminds me of Thibodeau, that was drafted last year. James E said, I think what we are forgetting as well. Hold on. I think what we're forgetting as well with Harbaugh as the coach, the free agents will want to play here. I agree with that. But James E, here's the thing that I'll give Wilks a feather in his cap. I think what you saw when Geno Smith was on the sideline and come up to Coach Wilks and say, I respect the heck out of you. I think you would see that from a lot of players. Man, one of the things that the Perryman, the Denzel Perryman, the Russell Okung, the who was the other guy? Carlos Dunlap. These guys showed that free agents would want to play for Carolina. That's a Matt Rhule thing. That whole OOU mess. One of us, So there were definitely guys that wanted to play for this team. That was really just a coaching block in the way. You know what I'm saying? So I don't really put that on, the team or coach or whatever like that. Although I will say that I think that more players would be willing to, step up to want to play for a Jim Harbaugh and a Steve Wilks. I think Steve Wilks would definitely stand up to, or would be a guy that people want to come play for. DB says, Sam was balling, bro. I seen a lot of talent in him. Imagine if he would have sat for a year behind someone. I couldn't agree more. People forget Sam Darnold, man. Look, I was killed on this show before. Not killed, ridiculed. I got to be honest with you. Like, I'm going to give you a moment of transparency and clarity. If anybody that's ever done YouTube says that they weren't afraid the first time somebody commented something negative to them, they're lying. Like, especially when you go live, right? You say something live and, people start disagreeing with you and whatever like that. Like, it'll get to you. It ain't no different than public speaking or, some people fear public speaking more than they fear death. You know what I'm saying? So, like, and this is a form of that. Because, essentially, like I'm sitting in the car line waiting to get my kids right now. And I'm talking my head off and there's people looking all around me and they probably looking at me like, what the heck is he doing? And I'm like, I don't care. But there was a time when I would say stuff and I'd be kind of hesitant on my text because I was like, man, I just don't want to get killed by my chat. But look, I was in favor of Sam Darnold. If any of y'all remember, the interview I did with Big Cat, that was I think the second or third video I ever did on my channel. I did an interview with Big Cat from Keep Pounding TV. And I don't know I think he changed it. Panther Unlimited or Uncensored or something. Yeah. Anyway, shout out to my homie. But anyway, when I done the interview with him, I asked him the question. I asked him if he thought that Sam Darnold was a franchise quarterback. And I won't tell you his answer, but I know, and it was something similar to mine because I don't want to throw him under the bus. But like mine was, yeah, like I think he can be. Now, whether he will or not, who knows? But I will say this, like, I think being a successful quarterback, like another thing that Wilks showed you with Sam is like, if you can cut down on the turnover, you want to peel away the onion one layer at a time. All right. I used to have a fumbling problem. Well, let's figure that out. Well, we know when you get hit, you fumble the ball, so we need to get a better offensive line. So we start peeling back that onion. So he limited the fumbles. He only had, I think, 2. One was a botch snap. The other one was clearly on him. But we were able to peel that back. All right. We know that if we press, if we run a lot of the same, think about what Chris Sims said last year, or Darius Slay. Darius Slay, very open-minded, very opinionated, went online and was saying like, hey, we were sitting on top of the routes. We knew what they were going to do long before they did it. Joe Brady had no variety in his play calling or whatever, right? So that would be hard for any quarterback to be successful if they're already sitting underneath, knowing where you're going with the ball, and so especially in press man or even in zone. If there's certain places in the zone, soft zone, where they know that you're going to be throwing, makes it a little bit easier for you. So if you can cut that down by getting a better OC, someone who can, basically help develop the traits that he has. I've seen Sam uncork some balls. I talk about all the time, I talk about all the time, like there was in that Minnesota game that we lost last year, man, Robbie Anderson drops that pass, which I think that was another one of the things that was holding him back. I think the fact that, Robbie's one of those kind of guys, like, and no disrespect to Robbie, but I got to say this really quick. There's guys in life, man, that like will work with certain people because they know how they can treat them, right? Because I said this on a live last year, man. This was one of those things I got killed for. When Robbie was on the sideline, like screaming and going crazy or whatever like that, the ball wasn't even thrown in his direction. It was thrown at DJ when that pick happened in the New England game. But I'm like, fam, it's a lot of people on this sideline that could be yelling, not you. And many, times you drop the ball and, routes, run wrong routes and all that kind of, no, you ain't the guy that need to be screaming on the sideline. I like Rob. Like, I think he's cool. He's a, chill guy, but not you, fam. Like, but I understand why he was doing it, because he was just trying to provide a spark, because Robbie historically didn't have to be that guy in the franchise. He was the guy that was just, the quiet guy that would go out and do his thing. So sometimes people don't know how to channel that emotion when they're not used to being in a leadership role. But, and that's another peg on Matt Rhule, because you're putting leadership on guys that aren't even leaders. But that's another conversation for another day. But the point is that Cam, when he came back, he struggled. He threw interceptions. He had, some bad game under a similar, offense. And we didn't see him do that to Cam, because I think what would have happened if he did that to Cam. It's a different animal. It's easy to do that to Sam Darnold, who's very mild-mannered, who's a respecter of persons. Cam Newton's also a respecter of persons. But Cam Newton ain't going to let you talk to him like he's crazy either. And so I think that was another thing. You get rid of, of that problem. And mild-mannered DJ Moore, like, DJ could be pissed. He could be mad. I think all the emotion that you've seen from over the past 5 years came out in one play that he got flagged for when DJ took his helmet off in that Atlanta game. Like, that was a culmination of emotion, over a 4-year period of mediocrity, what I'm saying, where you're still performing like crazy, and he threw that helmet off, and it turned into, a great moment for us, because we finally got to see, it's like you poking this guy like crazy, like, say something, what I'm saying? And he finally, said something. So, but yeah, I think that Sam, to get to the point, I do believe that Sam Darnold can be a franchise quarterback. I don't know, but a solid quarterback that can be a bridge, sure. But we've also seen solid quarterbacks win Super Bowls. It's the NFL, man. This thing can swing any way, man. Like, another thing, look, with Harbaugh, since we on the point of Harbaugh, man, the Seattle Seahawks were literally, for all those guys, like, I can't stand bitter people, man. Like, I love Richard Sherman, but sometimes he just irks me, man, because I'm like, I just don't like how hard he be going at Russell Wilson. Like, sure, is Russell Wilson a bit of a diva sometimes, now, especially lately? Sure. Is Russell Wilson kind of corny? As a believer, like, I'm a guy that wears my faith on my sleeve, but even I can look at Russell and say, like, sometimes he's a little cheesy, like, I'll say that. But should you be out trashing a guy that took your 7-9 team back to 11-5, 12-4 in a Super Bowl? No. I don't care how great your defense was. Y'all ain't do nothing before Russell Wilson got there, right? Harbaugh was in that same division. Harbaugh was in that division when Carson Palmer got traded to the Arizona Cardinals. Harbaugh, that wasn't no easy division at all. The Raiders might have been trash overall, but they were competitive. The Raiders always wake up because they got a crazy fan base, and I'm telling you, they always wake up for those division games. So it wasn't no cakewalk when he was there. And for him to be competitive in that division, especially with, iron sharpens iron, man. Like, I can assure you one thing, if Harbaugh does come to Carolina, this ain't gonna, this idea that, yeah, it looks like it now, and it looks, now like, okay, yeah, man, this gonna be an easy division or whatever like that. Sure, it will be, not for long. Because the one thing that iron indeed sharpens iron. When you get somebody good at a location, you can bet your bottom dollar. Like I don't know if any of y'all live in South Carolina, right? But if you're familiar with the QT gas station, it literally, like, if you see a QT, you can pretty much bet you're gonna see a Spinks 2 or 3 blocks down the road. It's competition. You know what I'm saying? So competition breeds competition. You do not want to be on the top by yourself, because that's what creates mediocrity. I need to be challenged. I hope Atlanta gets better. I hope the Saints get better. Why? Because it's not because I want to run roughshod. I don't want to be known as the Carolina Panthers that ran roughshod through the NFC South for 5 years because they were down. No. I want you to be the NFC South that's got 3 10-win teams and we still smacking everybody. Why? Because then you will know who we really are. What's up, QT? I ain't seen you in a while, brother. How you doing? LaVisca was a dud and we wasted those picks. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say he's a dud. I don't think he's, he obviously ain't. I don't know. I wouldn't call him a dud. I will say, by the way, though, the funniest thing I saw online was one time, Why Big Jordan said LaVisca Chenault run like he don't feel pain. I thought that was the funniest thing I saw. That man do run like an animal. But, man, talk to y'all for just a couple of more seconds, man. QT said he just finished up school. Hey, congratulations, man. Congratulations. Education is extremely important. Self-awareness is also important. Let me go back through some of these comments real quick. Robbie was very outspoken, but Joe Brady had nothing audibles in his system. Audibles are hot routes. I agree. Paul Kelly said, okay, Cat's new channel's called Panthers Uncensored. Okay. Shout out to Cat. Wouldn't be mad with the elite level wide receiver trading down the first. Hey, I agree with that. Somebody said I can see DJ requesting a trade. I don't think so. You know why? Because, like I said, smart people, and I'm not saying DJ wouldn't be smart to request a trade. I would understand it, but man, it's something to be said for, boy, can you imagine the kind of hero? I just need y'all to understand something. There's a statue in Philadelphia. I want you to think about all the quarterbacks Philadelphia's had in their history. Ron Jaworski, or Jaws, basically. Carson Wentz, who was on an MVP tear. Donovan McNabb. All these different kind of players. Who got the statue? Nick Foles. I'm telling you, if I'm DJ, I ain't leaving Carolina. It's only one comparable over me. And look, I will never, if I'm DJ, I will never in my life be able to overcome the shadow of 189. But I tell you what, if I deliver you one of these, I'll be dang close. I will be very, very, very close. So no, if I'm DJ, I ain't going nowhere. Because if we get really good and I bring home the hardware, I'm etched. I think he etched already, personally. But you bring home the hardware, especially if you are an integral part of bringing home that hardware, ain't no way I'm leaving Carolina. Why? To go win a Super Bowl with, Green Bay and end up being Desmond Howard. Yeah, y'all remember the kickoff return, but we always talking about Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Nobody be thinking about me. Go ask people in Tampa Bay. I know him because he's from my hometown. He another guy from my hometown. Ask people from Tampa Bay who Brad Johnson is. Etched. Mike Allstott. Etched. Steve Young was a quarterback there once upon a time. He didn't bring home the hardware, though. You bring home the hardware, it changes everything. So, no, as long as they paying, I'm playing. I ain't going nowhere. Keep pounding is a real thing, man. It's grown. I love to see the legacy of this team being created. You know, all these legendary players that we've had. We have finally started to grow a legacy. If DJ Moore finishes his career here, if he never wins the Super Bowl, number 2 is retired. Nobody's ever wearing that jersey again. Because he'll likely put up more yards than Smitty. Depending on how long his career lasts. So no, if I'm DJ, I'm chilling. I ain't going nowhere. So anyway, man, I'm about to see my little kids get in the car. It's been fun, man. I've had a very good time hanging out with you guys today. He can do it with a QB. I agree, bro. He get the right QB, it's on. And that's all he need. He need a QB and a running game. He need a solid coach. Who is that? What's up, man? My guy, C3. I'm the fifth honorary member of the C3 Panther podcast. Y'all remember that. Unlock the door, sweetie. Unlock the door. The unofficial 5th member of the C3 Panther podcast. Hi, Dad. If you will. What's up, guys?
Can I have some gum?
Yeah.
Hello.
Anyway, man, it's been fun, guys. I got my kids now. I'm getting ready to jump off of here. But trust me when I tell you, this has been fun. And I will certainly be back soon. I miss you guys, man. I had a absolute great time today.
Wait, what?
But
wait,
yeah.
On camera. What?
she was about to turn up. She saw she was on camera. But anyway, y'all, I appreciate y'all, man. Y'all stay blessed. Make sure to continue to pray for Damar Hamlin and his family. I'll continue to pray for you guys and your families. And you know what we do, man. Keep pounding.
You started streaming?